Rain-slicked streets gleamed under the dim city lights as a sleek red Ferrari sputtered to a stop, leaving its millionaire owner, Alexander, stranded in frustration. His expensive watch glinted as he checked his phone, only to find no signal. Cursing under his breath, he slammed the door, the storm soaking him within seconds. From the shadows, a small voice piped up. "Do you need help?" Alexander turned sharply to see a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, clutching a worn toolbox almost as big as she was. Her raincoat was dotted with patches, her boots caked in mud, but her eyes held a confidence that seemed impossible for someone so small. "My dad can fix it," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. Alexander blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "My dad?" he asked, skepticism dripping from his words. "Yes," she said firmly. "He fixes everything. You just wait." She opened the toolbox with a flourish and gestured toward the Ferrari as if it were a broken toy. Alexander's pride bristled. This was a car worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Could a little girl and her dad really fix it? Yet, as he watched her, there was an unspoken promise in her stance, a certainty that made him pause. Minutes passed, and the little girl began fiddling with the hood, muttering to herself. Alexander leaned against the car, partly amused, partly intrigued. Suddenly, her expression shifted. She gasped and looked up at him. "My dad isn't here," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But he taught me everything. He says if you can't reach him, you have to try anyway." Something in Alexander softened. The storm, the soaked streets, the impossibility of the situation, it all faded into the quiet determination radiating from this tiny girl. She worked with patience, coaxing the engine, tightening invisible screws in her own unique way. The Ferrari coughed once, then twice, and finally roared to life. Alexander's jaw dropped. You did this," he stammered. She shrugged, smiling through the rain. "My dad would be proud," she said. Alexander, a man used to buying solutions, felt a rare warmth in his chest. Here was proof that skill, love, and confidence didn't come from money, they came from heart. He handed her a dry towel, but she shook her head. "I'm already wet," she said. "My dad always says, if you're helping, you don't get in the way of the work." As the storm eased, Alexander realized that some lessons in life couldn't be bought, and some heroes came in the smallest packages. He offered her a ride home, but she shook her head again, hopping into the puddles without a second thought. "My dad can fix it," she called back over her shoulder. "And now I can too." Alexander watched her vanish into the night, feeling richer than ever, not because of the car, but because of the courage of a little girl who reminded him that true power often comes quietly and unexpectedly. Rain lashed against the streets of the city, turning asphalt into a reflective ribbon of light. Neon signs flickered above, their glow dancing in the puddles, while the wind tugged mercilessly at coats and umbrellas. A deep, throaty roar sliced through the storm, followed almost immediately by a strangled cough, a shudder, and silence. Alexander's Ferrari had stopped dead in the middle of the street, its engine refusing to obey the man who had always commanded wealth, power, and every convenience the world could offer. He slammed the steering wheel in frustration, cursing under his breath. The rain was merciless, soaking him through in seconds, running down the sharp lines of his tailored coat. He checked his phone, hoping for some divine intervention, but the screen remained stubbornly blank, no signal. The thought of calling a tow truck, waiting for hours, infuriated him. Time was his currency, and right now, every second felt stolen from him by this incooperative machine. As he stared down the sleek hood, muttering to himself, a voice sliced through the storm. "Do you need help?" Alexander froze, startled. He turned, his eyes scanning for the source, expecting perhaps a passerby, a street vendor, someone who would run away the moment they saw the expensive car. Instead, he saw a little girl, small and unassuming, standing in the shadows with a soaked yellow raincoat clinging to her tiny frame. Her boots were thick with mud, and she clutched a toolbox almost as big as her. Her hair stuck to her face in wet strands, and yet, in her eyes, there was a calm determination that seemed entirely impossible for someone so small. Help." Alexander's voice was incredulous. "I don't think. My dad can fix it," she whispered, almost reverently, as though saying the words out loud made them more real. Alexander blinked, trying to make sense of it. He looked at the Ferrari, a machine designed for speed and prestige, then back at this girl, who seemed completely unremarkable except for the strange, fearless conviction in her stance. Your dad?" he asked slowly. "Yes," she said. "But he isn't here. He says if something is broken, you don't just give up, you try anyway." "I can try." Alexander frowned, a mix of skepticism and amusement curling in his chest. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. He was a millionaire, a man used to commanding solutions with the flick of a finger, and yet here he was, stranded in a storm, being offered help by a child. Still, there was something about her that made him pause. Something in her eyes that said she had seen more than her years would suggest, that she had learned to be resilient in a way he had never experienced. She knelt beside the car and opened her toolbox with a flourish, her small fingers quickly sorting through an array of wrenches, screwdrivers, and other tools that looked far too heavy for her to carry for long. She leaned against the car's front wheel and began muttering to herself, tracing invisible lines and making adjustments that, to Alexander, seemed almost ceremonial. Minutes passed. The rain fell harder. Alexander's frustration turned into fascination. He had expected chaos, or failure, or perhaps a pitiful attempt, and yet the little girl worked with precision, moving with a rhythm that seemed almost instinctual. He crossed his arms, leaning against the car, his expensive shoes sinking slightly into the muddy street, watching her every move. Finally, she straightened up and looked at him, her expression a mixture of determination and apology. "My dad taught me everything," she said softly. "But he isn't here. He always says, if you can't reach me, you have to try anyway." I think I can do it." Alexander felt a tug at his chest. The arrogance he usually wore like armor began to falter. He realized that he had never approached problems like this. He had never had to rely on someone smaller, weaker, or less experienced. He was used to command, to control, to instant solutions. And yet, in front of him stood someone who embodied patience, ingenuity, and courage, qualities he realized he had long overlooked in his pursuit of power. She knelt once more, her hands moving deftly over the engine, twisting, turning, coaxing it as if it were a reluctant animal. Alexander felt a strange calm wash over him. He began to notice the details he had always ignored, the sound of the rain hitting the hood, the faint smell of wet metal and gasoline, the way her small hands moved with confident precision despite the storm. Then, with a soft cough, the Ferrari responded. A shudder ran through the